Hello and welcome. My name is Carol Carter, and I am the founder and CEO of Global Minded. We are in the middle of our 10-week virtual 2021 conference event, which is called Reboot Resilience: Rebound Remarkable. All of the sessions are over, as I said, 10 weeks, and they include the perspectives of very diverse people on how we can look at the circumstances of the last year or last year and a half and go forward with our best selves, our strongest selves, and some fortitude that we didn't know that we had, that the pandemic and the social injustice issues and all of the very difficult problems of the last year has actually showed us. So this week we're celebrating educators, and it is a delight to have the panel here today really exploring the role of artificial intelligence, what it is and how it can really help us to close the equity gap. So it's my great pleasure to introduce my colleague and one of the leaders of the K-12 equity team at Global Minded, Erika Twani. Erika is a learning enthusiast and an optimist of a better world built by humans with a life purpose. She is the founder and the CEO of Learning One-to-One Foundation. Prior to that, for many years, she was an executive with Microsoft in all of South America, which is pretty remarkable, but also informs a lot of her ability to understand technology and what technology can do from a learning standpoint. Her philosophy is to simplify complex concepts and make them useful for everyone, starting with children. To do so, she uses insights and skills from her 20+ years of experience working with corporate technology companies, shaping products and services to worldwide scalability. Her organization has worked with thousands of teachers in various countries, and Erika is the author of the just published book, Becoming Einstein's Teacher. Welcome, Erika, and your tremendous panel from all over the world. We are so honored to have you all here with us.
Thank you very much, Carol, and welcome everyone to this awesome session that I have the pleasure to share here with great education leaders around the world. So I wanted to introduce really quick the names of the panelists today, but they're going to be talking more about what they work on during their answers. So I'll start from my anti-clockwise here is Tisha Nguyen. Tisha is an educator. She has held many different positions in the education industry. And today she's at Microsoft. So she does understand what execution is all about in terms of education, but she also understands the perspective of technology. Then dear friend Pasi Silander from Finland. He's an education futurist. He eats and breathes every day what education will be all about in the future and how we can translate that, how we can prepare the pathway for students to achieve that future that they envision. Then Ramon Morales is a good friend from Intel. So although Ramon works at Intel Corporation, he works in the innovation area, and also Ramon recently received a doctorate in education. So he's passionate about it, and I'm sure he's going to bring great contributions to this panel. And finally, Adinawa Adjagbodjou, who is a student, a PhD student at the age of 22 at Harvard. So we're so proud to have Adinawa here with us today. She's going to give great perspectives from the student perspective. So let's get started. So how about this? Let's start from the context. Let's give context to this conversation. Let's start with Pasi, who is the education futurist of this group, to explain to us a bit about what AI is. Many think that it's a robot that will be, doing stuff that all the humans cannot do, right? But what is it, Pasi, really?
Yeah, it's not really a big deal. We meet AI every day when using social media, driving a car, using a cell phone. So AI is, in a nutshell, it's a lot of data and algorithms that process the data. For me personally, AI is something that we use computers to make automatic decisions or can analyze the data. So it's kind of decision making or creativity done by computers. So it's not a big deal nowadays.
That's right. So it's like almost like following a recipe to make a cake, right? So if you
Yeah,
have,
and every time a different kind of cake. Not the same recipe all the time, but it evolves all the time. So first chocolate cake, then cherry cake, then cinnamon cake. So all the
okay,
mixtures.
depending on the data that we have, right?
Yeah,
Depending on the
exactly.
ingredients.
The
that we have.
ingredients.
All right. So everybody, now that we understand what AI is all about, which is the short for artificial intelligence, let's discuss something that is very alive today, which is the threats. What are the threats? So I would love to have each of the panelists point out one threat that we foresee we have today in this world of artificial intelligence. I would like to get started by giving you one piece of information. Today in the US, we invest 56%. I'm sorry, our investment in AI grows 56% year over year. So every year we have 50%, 56% more in investment since 2016. Whereas in education, in K-12, we have a growth of 3%. So imagine this, since 2016, AI investment is growing at 56% a year. And in education, K-12 is going at 3% a year. That for me is a big threat. How about you, Dr. Ramon?
Well, basically, as any other technology, if it is not used in an effective way, it could represent a threat. So I know that there are a lot of misconceptions about the possible threats that artificial intelligence will bring. One could be, for instance, the loss of certain jobs, where basically, while many jobs will be created by artificial intelligence, and many people predict a net increase in jobs, or at least anticipate the same amount will be created, some of these are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence. So this will require changes to trainings and education programmers to prepare our future workplace, and as well to help our current workers to transition to this new era. So there are going to be new positions, there are going to be some transitions, and that is something that we need to be aware, and that is something that we need to, as educators, we need to educate our new generations, that this transition is going to happen, but again, we need to ensure that we are using and that we are making effective use of the technology.
Okay, and just to complement Dr. Ramon, in terms of at your work at Intel and innovation in education, right? Is there anything that you see that would be a threat that Intel is working right now?
More than the threats, we perceive opportunities, you know, Erika. So something that we are doing, and one of the biggest concerns that we have, is to try to bring all the talent that in the different countries exists. So by trying to prepare them for this future. Unfortunately, something that we have been noticing, specifically on the engineering areas and specifically in these key mega tendencies areas like artificial intelligence, is that few people is preparing themselves, especially in emerging markets, for this new era. For that reason, we have been creating certain programs with universities, creating some specialization courses and trainings that even our employees, or in my case, I have been delivering to different students just to open their mind and to help them understand that this transition is happening. And it's happening today. It's not that it's going to happen in 10, 20, 30 years. And that is one problem that we are facing nowadays. Everybody thinks that we are talking about fiction, movies, and so on. And no, the technology is here. It's right now. So we need to make sure that everybody is using it and in some way making effective use and implementing it in their day-by-day activities.
How about from the education perspective, Tisha? What do you think? What are the threats?
Yeah, so building on what Dr. Ramon said, I think it's a serious threat because it widens the achievement gap that already exists between students of color compared to their counterparts. when we are talking about students of color, those students who are from low-income communities and don't have the advantages and benefits of their peers, data is already showing that they are lagging significantly behind in academics, specifically relating to mathematics, science, English language arts, reading and writing. Those are foundational components. As a result, when you first started, you started with the money gap. So we already have an achievement gap problem. Now here is this money gap coming down. We really need a whole complete digital transformation of the education system worldwide so that these gaps don't get bigger and out of control. And some would say they already are. So that would be my biggest threat.
So we have participating here, Pasi, who is from Finland, one of the most admired countries, education systems in the world, right? Pasi, what do you think is a threat? How's Finland seeing that, or Europe?
Yeah, well, my job is doing the revolution, to revolute the education system with teachers and with AI. But I think the biggest threat is that if the AI is biased and it makes some kind of self-fulfilling prophecies, and we tend to think that every morning is a new possibility. So whole idea that if AI set the rules or set the future for the kids, so our threat is that AI is not ethical. It censors, it narrows the learning possibilities. So that's the threat we believe. We want to avoid that at all.
That's so important in terms of being biased to some sort of background, right? Benefiting one side than the other, more one side than the other. That's really a big threat. How about Adinawa? You are at Harvard today. You are exposed to the big minds and the big thinkers today, and you are yourself a big thinker, but you also have this student experience. What do you see as a big threat of AI?
Yes, definitely. So I would definitely say that the biggest threat that I've seen, both from research that I've had the opportunity to do recently and just also my background working in a more interdisciplinary field that has to take more into account the fact that there are several factors that affect any given, technology. I would say that the biggest threat that I see and have seen from my research sort of builds on what Pasi has just said, and it's this idea of the way in which AI models its environment, and it models after the people who are designing the AI. So if we have a society that is biased, sort of like Tisha has already said, that recognize that there's certain students who have disadvantages, but maybe doesn't adjust itself to recognize those gaps, then we're going to be building systems that further expand those gaps. So I really think that that's one of the biggest threats that I see. And coming from a perspective, being a student who has, been in a school that is, has a ton of resources, but then also has groups of students who are marginalized and may not have access to all those resources, it's really important to recognize both how great an institution overall can be and how a system overall can be. But if it doesn't recognize the gap or the disadvantage that certain students within that system have, we're just going to continue perpetuating the same systems and perpetuating the same model of our current society.
Thank you, Adinawa. Great input. And I do believe that you mentioned to me in a conversation that that's going to be your PhD thesis, right?
Yes, so my work is definitely going to be focused on looking at students in their context and their environments, and also taking into consideration different disadvantages that different students have, in addition to modeling and designing for students with their participation in mind. Because I think that that's one thing that, we're all, have really great perspectives here, but if we're not building with the students, we're really missing a lot of opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Unfortunately, it's not like we can do this and then AI will disappear, or we'll continue and we do whatever we want, right? AI is here to stay. So let's discuss now what are the opportunities for us to work with AI in education. And let's get started with Pasi. the Futurist?
Yeah. So I think the possibility we have is that every student can achieve her or his full potential, because we cannot lose any of the students, any of the potential. And when utilizing AI, we can help the students, for example, with the learning disabilities. We can provide extra support to learners. We can personalize the learning process, individualize the learner. So all the learners are individual. And if you think about situation in the classroom, teachers are having 30 students in a class and they don't have time and they cannot individualize or personalize the learning process. So that's why we need AI to personalize the learning, that all the students, every students will achieve the full potential they have.
Thank you, Pasi. From the educator perspective, Tisha, what are the opportunities that we see with AI?
Yeah, so I agree with all that Pasi has stated. The one that I would add to that is the virtual learning and exposure component. So I think we are all aware that when students read more, they get to expose themselves to the outside of their immediate environment. So their mind gets to travel, they get to learn more. And for students who don't have that opportunity, for example, they only know the 4 blocks they live in and go to school in, they have never been across town before, they have never seen another part of the city or another country. AI has a virtual learning component that can expose them to those learnings, to deepen their experiences and deepen the perseverance and the courage and the grit and the enthusiasm for learning, so that their horizons can be broadened as a students and they can see limitless possibilities.
Great, Tisha. Thank you so much. How about Adinawa? We know that you're talking about, the threats that students can face in the future if we have all this division. However, you also see opportunities, right?
Oh,
Please?
absolutely. I think that, and this is definitely why I'm interested in doing more of this work, is because I think that there's ample opportunities for students to really, sort of like Tisha has just mentioned, expand their horizons. One of my favorite, innovations that was developed and is still being further developed is cognitive tutors, which allows students to sort of personalize or just allows the system that they're working with to build on the knowledge that they have and sort of give them clues or give them hints as they're working to allow them to, let's say you have a student who may not be able to, is working at home and doesn't have the opportunity to ask a parent for help immediately, that system is working to give them recommendations on, approaches or hints that they should take next in order to solve that problem correctly. So I think that, as much as we need to be cognizant of the threats, there's definitely a lot of opportunities for AI to help close the gap if we get it right.
Thank you, Adinawa. And what is Intel seeing as opportunities, Dr. Ramon?
Oh, there is a huge opportunity, because not only the students, but well, the teachers, the parents, and so on, are generating tons and tons of data that can be converted to information, and that information can be used in benefit not only of the student, but as well as the teacher. For instance, by analyzing the learned information, artificial intelligence can generate groups particularly structured to certain tasks or groups that balance the learning weakness with another learner's strengths. So there are different ways on how we can use the data that is being generated by each one of the students. And at the end of the day, we need to convert that data to information that is going to be used by the teacher or is going to be used by the system in order to improve the education.
Great. So it's all about generating data, and it's all about what we do at the end of the day with this data, right?
And more than generating data, the data is over there, It's just a matter to analyze that. And that is something that artificial intelligence is going to help us to do. You know what? Because at the end of the day, the students are there, the data is being generated, but we need to do a deep analysis of that data to convert the data to information. So as soon as I have that information, logically, I can in some way analyze and predict which one is going to be the behavior of certain students or certain groups. I can in some way, in a very predictive way, can learn students' habits and propose the most efficient student scheme for them.
Awesome. So let's continue with Dr. Ramon. Let's talk about successful uses of AI in education. All of you, all of the panelists here have either experienced or have worked with clients at Microsoft, at Intel, the Minister of Education in Finland, right? The experience at Harvard. So what have you seen, Dr. Ramon, out there in terms of successful use of AI in education?
I think that nowadays different softwares and as well different educational portals are integrating some small pieces of artificial intelligence. As I mentioned before, by predicting and analyzing all this information coming from the students, can structure the best plans for each one of the different people that is in some way using the software or using these portals. Another very good use that I have been kind of amazed on how it has been growing is the virtual reality learning, for instance. So these systems allow the educators supporting authentic environments and extend the boundaries of the classroom, to give you one example. So there are different areas where it has been applied, but as in my personal opinion, we have seen just a very small piece of what is going to happen with artificial intelligence in education.
Thank you, Dr. Ramon. How about Tisha? How about at Microsoft? What have you seen there in your experience of the use of AI in education?
Yep. So before I go to Microsoft, with my educator hat on, which things I see at Microsoft has been supporting those students who are in the remediation category. So for example, they are in 6th grade, but they are reading on a 4th grade level, for example. AI can successfully be implemented during the school day, at the end of the school day, during summer school, in a summer school program to bring them up to their desired reading level that they're supposed to be at. So the remediation component, which goes back to closing the achievement gap. On the other end of that, the acceleration level. So we have students who are, in spite of their environment, they're in 6th grade, but they are performing reading and scoring on an 8th or 9th grade level. We don't want to hold those students back. We want to give them the AI to go even further so they can be 22 in a PhD program at Harvard, like our panelists on here.
Thank you, Tisha. Pasi, what have you guys seen there in Finland and Europe in general?
Yeah, what we are building, so we are building tools for the teachers and the students, and then dashboards for the pedagogical leaders, like head teachers or school principals. So we see this AI and learning analytics quite a holistic tool. We have a lot of data, a lot of information about the students. And the question is how to model that and how to utilize that pedagogically. We don't just have the data, but we want to scaffold the students' learning. So our goal is to make students' learning process to be ideal. Or someone could say optimal, but I want to use the word ideal. And it's all about scaffolding. And what is the learning? And what is the task of the teachers and computers? It's make the students to think, activate students' thinking. So the best applications they are activating students to think. And we learn by thinking. So this system initiate thinking and learning processes in students' heads.
That is so important what you just said, Pasi. I actually discussed that in this book as well, regarding the how AI was first conceived, right? If you hear about artificial intelligence, it has a lot to do with biological intelligence. All the terms, like the data is the information that we receive in our brains, and then we form neural networks, right? When we have the artificial intelligence neural networks, and then we have machine learning, right? Which is our human learning, right? And then you have deep neural networks, which is the analysis of a lot of information at the same time, and that we also have in our minds. So I do agree, and I love what Pasi just said, because if we use AI that does not activate and does not create this cognitive control that we humans supposed to have, we're just eternalizing dependency on machines and dependency on apps, right? Practical example is let's say that you cannot stop looking at your Facebook feed all the time, or you cannot stop looking at your Twitter Facebook all the time. You're addicted, right? You're addicted at that. There's no excuse. You're addicted. But if you have a cognitive control to understand how much you have to check that during the day, then it's different. And it's the same thing with students, right? I cannot learn if not with this app, or I cannot learn if not with this and that. I cannot activate my learning if I don't do this. You have to have the cognitive control to understand how your brain works, how things are going, how apps are influencing your learning. And if we allow students, if we use AI intelligently, we can foster all of that with our students. So Adinawa, finally, what have you seen that has been successful implementations of AI?
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, one of the things that I'm really interested in is just the ecosystem in which students learn overall. And when you think about that, there's different points at which students interact with their environment. So that can be student and their learning, student and teacher, students with their families. And one of the areas of interaction that I've seen research being developed in actually at Carnegie to sort of help evolve the interaction between students and teachers, it's this system called Class Insight. And what this actually has been working to do is to give teachers, you know, we've been talking a lot about students, but, you know, teachers obviously play a big part in this as well. But this essentially gives teachers insights into, you know, how aware or how much students are paying attention, how much they are rereading, you know, basically takes into consideration, you know, how the student is interacting within the environment in which they are. And it gives teachers that feedback that is sometimes, you know, so hard to gain on, you know, is the you know, lecture that I'm giving engaging right now? And so I think that that's also like one really great way to sort of think about AI and the work that it can do, and allowing teachers to have more agency and just understanding of their classrooms.
That's great. So now our audience have a set of information that they can work with when they are choosing the right apps and the right technology to implement in their schools. Thank you so much. So let's move forward. Let's start with Pasi now, because he's an education futurist. Let's start, Pasi, what do you foresee happening regarding the use of AI in education in the future?
Well, you know, I'm seeing two different kind of track. One very kind of not so good track is that there are a lot of applications that makes learning to be very mechanistic, very mechanical behavioristic learning, like learning mathematics. And you have to just repeat the same formulas, same tasks, same exercises, or multiple choice questions or gaps. And this is very sad thing, because I don't believe that anyone can learn, for example, mathematical thinking or communication by using multiple choice questions. I think the learning should be very creative. And it's a human activity is to be the creative. And I see that, okay, now the future is really about how to make AI to support the students' creativity. And it's not just kind of utilizing existing knowledge, but it's creating new solutions in a new situation. And when students can themselves utilize the AI for their own learning, and they understand what is the machine learning and how they are learning, and how they can utilize the machine learning and AI as a tool for learning. And I think that's the future. And it's something that we talk a lot of about phenomenon-based learning. So it's not just learning individual school subjects. It's learning for life, learning creativity, problem solving, decision making, life skills. And I believe all the kids who are now in the school, all the students who are in the school, they have to be able to use AI and machine learning in their future, globally, really. And this is the future. We really train our kids to face this kind of future. And it's not just facing the future, but it's the building the future. So how our kids can build up the future with technology, with AI. And I have seen wonderful, wonderful prototypes and applications that are very holistic. And they really stimulate the students' kind of creativity. We have a lot of AI applications that can make arts, like tunes or kind of poems or anything. But how to combine this to the educational aspects? A lot of psychological and pedagogical knowledge we have on the learning. So we have to really combine the psychology and technology to support our students and learners.
Thank you, Pasi. So a lot of educators think that the introduction of AI and technology in general means bring computers to the classroom and bring apps and teach kids to code, right? It resumes into that. Tisha, what's your, in your perspective, what do you foresee happening in the future in education in the use of AI?
Yeah, so I think that it needs to be managed very closely. I think schools that are high-performing schools that naturally do very well, and private schools, I think they will have an easier time because they will have done the pre-planning and the pre-work and all the thinking behind it that we are now discussing. However, for schools that's already struggling for funding and are already facing challenges, I wonder if they will have the bandwidth to sit back and think through the best practices for using and implementing AI. It makes me wonder if on the government level, some recommendations can be handed down as suggestions of best practice models to follow, where it has already gone well and produced desired results and outcomes. That way, all schools will have a model to follow, and everybody will at least be starting at the same level.
That's an outstanding point, Tisha. Thank you so much for sharing that. We need to make sure that schools have time, school leaders have time, right, to think this through with the support of great professionals like this panel right now that can give them direction. But at the same time, if we could have a framework that is that makes life easier, right, for those schools, it would be a lot better to make thoughtful decisions. Thank you, Tisha. So, Dr. Ramon, so let's go to you. What do you think?
Oh, well, the first thing that I would like to mention is that for several years, we have been analyzing which one would be these 21st century skills that our students might need. So several institutions and several experts in education have been analyzing this area, where based on the previous comments from my colleagues, one is creativity, and yes, creativity is going to be very, very important, but as well, critical thinking, One of the problems that we are having nowadays is that our students can learn whatever they want, and it's just a click of distance. They can use their cell phone, they can do a click in their cell phone, and they can bring any kind of knowledge that they would like to. The problem that we are having is that they are not having this kind of critical thinking. So I think that artificial intelligence is going to help a lot because it's going to be analyzing the learner. It's going to be analyzing their information. It's going to be analyzing the data that is being produced by them. And it's gonna bring the possibility to have some kind of intelligent tutoring systems that they will be capable of functioning together with a teacher and can effectively change and support the learning using different algorithms. Something that I would like to mention is that artificial intelligence is not going to replace the teacher. The teacher is the one that does the magic. That's a magic inside the classroom. The teacher is the key in all this equation, where it's going to facilitate the learning logically using these tools like artificial intelligence as any other tool, but we need to have that kind of facilitator. And that is going to be the role of the teacher.
Dr. Ramon, you read my mind because I would push the panel to discuss whether artificial intelligence will replace teachers or not, because we're talking here about, accelerating learning or remediating learning and, all those great apps that can help, to further students' learning. But we still have Adinawa to answer the question as to what she sees in terms of what's going to happen soon in education in the use of AI. And then we're going to come back to this question about whether teachers will be replaced or not.
Yeah. I think that there's immense opportunity for AI with education. I think particularly with agency with students. I think, sort of like as we've touched on throughout the conversation, there's a certain level of, we want students to be able to feel independent in their learning, and through doing that, they're able to be more creative. I definitely remember times when I was, feeling like, there was more that I wanted to learn, and, we're maybe sometimes going at a slower pace than I wanted to, but then there was other courses in which I felt like I really needed time to really hone in or learn in a different way than what was provided from, the textbook or, the very strict lesson plan. So I think that for me, that's what I foresee is the opportunity to allow students to maybe go at their own pace, but also be able to give themselves and their teachers feedback as they're learning. If a student is maybe revisiting several, passages over and over again, maybe that's, giving signal to a teacher to come back and maybe have a conversation with that student over that passage. If a student needs their learning to be displayed, visually rather than verbally, because, maybe they're developing a learning disadvantage, then, those are all opportunities through which, AI can definitely help in helping us understand ourselves and our learning environments a bit better.
Absolutely, Adinawa. So Adinawa, you may not know, the rest of us know that because we're over 40 years old. But way, way back then, we had something called encyclopedia. And we had the Barça, and we had the Britannica, and we had all this great encyclopedia that we used to research on, right? And today you have the internet. The internet doubles its size and information every 2 years or so. And we have information at our fingertips, right? If we don't understand something in a textbook, we can go back to the internet and research on that specific word. And then if you Google it, you're going to have related movies, related websites, related textbooks, related videos, related so many things, all related to the subject that you're studying. Everything behind that is AI. It's AI because it's looking for specific, that specific word throughout the internet, data, right? And then it's filtering that according to the interests that people have in that subject. And your history provides to Google, what kind of things that you have searched before and that you're interested before. Even Google knows that you prefer to watch movies or videos rather than read text. So it's amazing the impact that AI can have in agency development, as Adinawa said. But let's go back to the teacher and AI. There's something that worries me a lot. The other day I read an article that says that 27% of teachers reported that they will leave the profession by the end of the academic year of 2020-2021 because they are tired, they are exhausted, they were so pressured, and it was so challenging to deal with so many things besides academics. Now you're dealing with the emotions of students, you're dealing with presence, you're dealing with hours and hours and hours in front of a Zoom, class, and students are also tired. So 27% said they will leave. What do you guys think about that? So we talked about the benefits of AI, right? What's going to happen? Will we really see technology replacing teachers or doing the role of teachers? What do you think is going to happen? Anyone?
So,
Tisha. There you go.
no, I don't see technology ever being able to replace a teacher. I remember when I was a principal and a teacher, from personal experience, I would always tell my teachers as a principal, you don't know what this child is coming to school emotionally bearing. You don't know the impact that your words have on this child. As a result, we have heard many examples of teachers being key influencers and motivators in students' lives just by the words they speak into them. That encouragement, that zeal, that enthusiasm. Many kids have reported they would just be so excited just to go to that one teacher's class. We are going to still need teachers. Now the 20%, it's tough. And I think what districts need to do is be aware and address those concerns. So for example, at Microsoft, it's been tough for us because you can say we have been first responders to the first responders during this pandemic. So we have felt quite a bit of this ourselves. Definitely not on the teacher scale. However, I'm pleased to report with the part that we felt, I am vice chair of an employee resource group called Blacks at Microsoft. And what we started doing is running a monthly mental health series where we get to speak to each other about what we are going through and what it takes to make it through. And our managers and GMs on these calls with us, and they're hearing. So they are the decision makers. They can put these words into action and put funding behind it. I really think that school systems need to adopt a similar approach.
I think Pasi wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, learning is always social activity. But if you think about the roles of the teachers, so if teachers are just giving lectures at the front of the classroom and using the blackboard, it's very easy to replace with computers or with AI. But if teachers are having a dialogue and giving a kind of social background, values, everything important for the students or emotional support, that cannot be replaced by computers. But I would say that teachers' role will change. It's not just giving information or giving lectures, but it's helping, encouraging students, activate students to think and learn. And of course, this AI is a very good tool for teachers. And I always say that it's like a vacuum cleaner, so it makes your life very easy. And if you have a robot vacuum cleaner, it's super easy then. You don't have to clean the floor.
There you go. So, Dr. Ramon, Adinawa, do you want to comment?
Yeah, so as you know, Erika, for me, the teacher is the one that does the magic inside the classroom. And for me, they have been a facilitator, and they will be a facilitator in all this process. Giving you one specific example that I have seen in these 2 years, and it's pretty sad to see what you mentioned, Erika, and it's totally true. They had to transition, or because of this pandemic situation, to use the technology, and they were forced to use the technology, unfortunately. And something that I noticed, and that was early in 2020, when I did a research in more than 500 universities here in Mexico, because everybody was talking about innovation. So, and let me clarify something. There is a big difference between creativity and there is a big difference between innovation. There are 2 different terms. Creativity, I can be very good to bring in very good ideas and so on. But if I don't implement those ideas if I don't have a positive impact with that implementation, I'm not going to have innovation. So what I'm mentioning that, so the universities were pretty much focusing their efforts in order to incentivize and ignite creativity efforts. But the ones that do the magic, the ones that were the experts, motivating the students, offering technology, offering not only technology, but business knowledge, cultural knowledge, and so on, in order to move the students from the creativity to the innovation, were the teachers. So for me, are the ones that do that magic inside the classroom, and independently of which one of the technologies we are bringing into the schools, the teachers needs to be there. They are going to continue, and I know that this is my personal point of view, but I don't foresee that they are going to be replaced by the technology.
Yeah. Absolutely. Do you want to contribute, Adinawa?
Yes, I was going to say I agree with everything that everyone's been saying. I think that, much like, everyone has been saying, there's a qualitative aspect to learning that, it's not always as easy to measure as, test scores, et cetera. But we know that dumping, technology into an environment does not fix the intrinsic problems that exist there, as demonstrated by the infamous one laptop per child, sort of experiment that, didn't go too well. I think that, teachers offer support that, AI, at least AI as we are developing it, is not able to yet. And I think sort of related to what Tisha mentioned earlier, I sort of sometimes worry about, if, we continue to perceive AI as something that is able to just replace teachers. I think that the students that will be most negatively affected would be students, in areas where there are already low resources. If we want to sort of think that, oh, let's just replace the teachers and those salaries with, computers, we're just going to end up with a bigger gap. So I don't think teachers will go anywhere anytime, and I certainly hope that they don't.
Thank you, Adinawa. And we do have to learn a lot from Finland, right? In that sense, because we do have to recognize our teachers and make sure that they're well compensated, respected as in this profession, because they're the ones that will enhance our biological intelligence rather than just rely on artificial intelligence for our students to continue to learn. Thank you so much. So we wanted to wrap up really quick with a one recommendation that the audience should be observing when choosing technology today, from each of the panelists. And then we'll spend like 5 minutes or so answering any questions that Celeste will guide us through. How about that? Let's start with Tisha.
Okay, so Microsoft actually has done a bunch of research on this, and it's ongoing, as you know, but they have come up with 6 principles. And I agree with them. They actually did a lot of great work. So one is fairness. Choosing AI systems should treat all people fairly. Reliability and safety. It should perform reliable and safe. Privacy and security should be secure and respect privacy. Inclusivity and diversity and inclusion. Empower everyone and engage all people. Transparency, something that should be understandable, and accountability. Making people should be accountable for AI systems. That's my recommendation.
Thank you, Tisha. How about Pasi?
Well, I have quite a simple piece of advice. So focus on the pedagogy and learning process, not on the technology.
That's awesome, Pasi. I'm so aligned with you. It's all about the learning process. And if we first start from there and attach technology to it, technology will be the tool, not the means. Dr. Ramon.
Well, I fully agree with you, as you know. So at the end of the day, the technology is just a tool. You can have the best technology, and it doesn't warranty that you are going to have the best student. So at the end of the day, it's making effective use of this technology independently on which one is that technology. But let's make sure that we are using an effective use and that we are aware that it's just a tool. It's not going to replace the learning of the student. It's not going to replace the teaching from the student, the teaching experience for the teacher.
And finally, Adinawa.
Yeah, definitely. I think what I would say is, keeping humans first and then context in mind is incredibly important. I think that we still have a long ways to go and have a lot more to learn as it pertains to education itself. So like everyone has said, slapping a sticker of, technology won't solve the problems that we still have, if we're just thinking about the US, for example, won't solve the issues that we still have in the education space overall. So there's work that we can do there, and we should definitely look for ways for technology to help us, but there's a lot of work to be done on the human side as well.
Thank you so much, Adinawa, and thank you so much, everyone. So let's go back to Carol. Let's see if we have any Q&A.
Yeah, we'll encourage people to put their questions in and just put them in the chat. We don't even have to put them in the Q&A, but I have a question, which I think is really kind of germane to all of this, which is knowing that technology companies are still predominantly, white males. How do we have rubrics and how do we have DEI ways to have checks that may not be part of the people that are making a lot of the decisions developing the AI? And also the same could be true for some of our places like MIT and, places like, Adinawa is there at Harvard. How are we bringing all these different perspectives of diversity so that all these people that the AI will affect are actually represented when it is actually being developed? That's my question for you all.
Anyone can start.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough question. It's a question that I spent the last, 2 semesters actually working with my group on expanding. And there's this body of work by Microsoft researchers actually looking at HCI guidelines as they intersect with critical race theory, and sort of thinking about, sort of like I commented in my last remark, thinking about context and, we're sort of building out this set of guidelines that thinks about, how are we keeping the people that we're going to be that are going to be affected in mind. And it's sort of like this long list of things, but I guess that's just to say that there's a number of different steps that can be taken. Accountability, intentional use of data collection processes, thinking about who do we cut out of our data collection processes. If there's outliers, like those outliers might seem like outliers to us if we're looking at a predominantly white society, but if we think about the fact that those outliers are people who may be from marginalized communities, then maybe we are more intentional than in keeping people who are underrepresented as part of our conversation.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is how do we actually get them to the table where the decisions are being made? And so that's where I think, Adinawa, you and your resources and your networks, you can be at those tables of influence. And we need to have more and more young people from all different backgrounds that represent, the US and the world influencing those kinds of decisions. And I think same with Tisha talking about, that she's vice chair of the Blacks at Microsoft. Well, there's different ERGs across populations at Microsoft. There's ability status, there's LGBTQ, there's all kinds of things. How are those people being harnessed and their communities to develop the AI that Microsoft's developing? And I think the more that, Amazon and Google and all the different tech giants are really committed to that and asking that, figuring out how that diversity can get to the table, that's going to ensure that all voices and all backgrounds are represented as time goes on.
I think it would be great if Pasi could contribute a bit more what's happening in Europe. That's great stories there.
Yeah. So first of all, this AI cannot be developed in isolation. We need a kind of global community. And Europe and in Finland, we have been founding the community with Microsoft and other countries globally. And this Constellation network is a global network to develop the AI. There are many countries, many educational systems in this Constellation network. And we believe that we have to do this as a global task. One country is not enough, one education system is not enough, because we have to think so globally. We need different countries, European countries, American countries, African countries, Asian countries to develop this AI and bright future for our kids globally. So that's pretty much what we believe. Good kind of globalizations in the AI.
Thank you, Pasi. I think Dr. Ramon wanted to say something.
Yes, just to mention that this is a very important point, because at the end of the day, all the artificial intelligence algorithms are built by humans, you know? So they can, in some way, have built in some biases that we as a humans might have. And this is really important because at the end of the day, giving you one specific example, in my case, I'm responsible for the innovation office here in Intel Center, where we are validating and designing future technologies with more than 1,200 employees. So talking about innovation, we analyze three big areas. It's not only the technology per se, it's as well the business area, and as well we are pretty much focused on the user. And being focused on the user means that we need to use ethnographers, we need to be very, very close to universities, research institutions, and so on, to understand all these points that you are bringing here. So with that, we are trying to bring holistic solutions from the different perspectives, but that is something that, believe me, several companies, we are fully aware, we are trying to integrate all these point of views, uses, and as well this point of views. And at the end of the day, this is one of the top priorities that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carol, with you.
Well, we have about 3 more minutes. Is there anything else that everybody wants to say, just to close anything else out, or should we go ahead and just share a little bit more about this week?
Don't be shy.
Maybe if everyone has one closing sentence, powerful thought.
I have one. Let's make sure that we use an effective use of the technology. And technology is not going to replace the teachers, it's not going to replace everything that we know. It's just a tool.
I would say get your copy of Becoming Einstein's Teacher, because I give great advice in terms of the use of AI and technology. You understand a lot better how we connect biological intelligence and artificial intelligence, how your brain will work, and how neurotransmitters work in your brain, to make sure that students are learning more effectively. And I also talk a lot about the learning process that Pasi mentioned, that is so important for us to make sure that we're setting our students to a successful future, a happy future, a future where they'll be joyful, a future that they'll be more human than ever, even though we have artificial intelligence all around us.
Well, thank you so much, Erika, and to each of you. It's been an incredible panel, and we look forward to working to make the AI that can be the most effective for teachers and learners, and to work with these technology companies to really get the diverse leaders at the table like each of you, so that you're connecting them also with students and young people who can also weigh in. That's why we're so glad Adinawa, representing students, was able to be on the panel today. So just going to give you a very quick sneak peek to the rest of the week. Tomorrow we have Latino leaders as learning change makers. On Wednesday, we have developing the principal and superintendent diverse pipeline in K-12 with Dr. Mort Sherman from AASA and some incredible leaders that he works with through the Urban Superintendents Program. And then on Thursday, we have equity, inclusion, and belonging in K-12 with one of our other K-12 leaders, Dr. Benekalik, and people who are here from one of the school districts in Ohio. And then finally, on Friday, we have building the diverse talent pipeline in K-12, master's programs and PhD programs. And we've got one of our first gen grads from 2015, Richard Mays, who is now already been promoted in Denver Public Schools and is a program manager for the IB programs, but he was in Global Minded's first student leaders class. So it's pretty cool to see him toe to toe with all these other educators on Friday. So that's our lineup for this week. But I just want to say, I hope we see all of you next year in Denver. And in the meantime, every single month we have equity events. There's one for tech, there's one for STEM, there's one for higher ed, there's one for K-12. And I have to say also, Tisha, Lonnie and Shai Everett and some other folks have participated in those with us. And we look at that as a way to keep the community every single month growing, contributing, and fortifying each other as we all work together to close the equity gap. So thanks to all of you and Erika for your wisdom and your incredible network with all of these folks. So it's been really a pleasure to spend this last hour with you all. And thank you for being global-minded inclusive leaders.